Hi everyone, you're listening to the Vialucci podcast, uncensored and completely unedited discussions about life and everything in it. We hope you enjoy the show.
I know you're going to get annoyed that I will introduce you in a second, but we've just looking at Andrew Wallis's newspaper, and Charles, we will get to the thing, but I don't read newspapers, but I understand that they've all got. That means that type of person.
But I understand the concept of
this. Yeah, but I didn't until
it's paper and news.
Yeah. No, but I meant the political thing, because I've kept away from all that. But I understand that means that, and that usually means you're more left or right or whatever. And I didn't really know what the Daily Mail was. It was only when I watched an Alan Partridge episode, and one of the guys meets the other guy that's just like him, and he's got a copy of the Daily Mail, and he goes, Daily Mail, and Alan Partridge goes, possibly the best newspaper in the world. I thought, right, I know everything about the Daily Mail now. It's an Alan Partridge favourite. I get it. It's also...
Interestingly enough, the Telegraph is actually got worse.
In what way?
The Telegraph is now the Daily Mail for very old people.
Oh, it's even fracturing into...
Yeah, and it's awful. It didn't used to be that. Didn't used to necessarily be that bad. But now reading some of the articles, my goodness, it is objectionable.
We'll move on. This is the last question on newspapers. What's a young person's news? Is there a sort of, what would be the youth version? What's the
Twitter? Honestly,
no, but I mean, what would be the newspaper that was for the youngest generation?
Honestly, I think kids don't read newspapers.
No. I still find it funny when I see somebody reading The Sun, because aren't you like a caricature now? The Sun. The Sun
used to be. We will introduce you, I promise.
Yeah, go on.
The Sun used to be a lot of fun. I didn't agree with politics, but they used to have. It used to have fun headlines, and it used to be kind of a zeitgeist thing where it was sort of it tried to appeal to the everyman and the zeitgeist, and it sort of had a slight whimsy. It had a slight whimsy and a bit of a sense of humour about things. It didn't take itself too seriously. It was a bit daft and a bit silly, and it would pick up things that were daft and you know. But one of the deputy editor of the Mail took over a few years ago, about 4, 5, 6 years ago now, and it's just very politicised now, and it's lost its sense of fun.
Like everything, lost its sense of fun and political. Well, there we go. Andrew Wallis, OBE. What's the pro? Were you going to correct me on something?
No.
Oh, okay. What's the silence? I thought, oh no, I've got it wrong. How do you get an OBE? Is there a phone call? Do you apply? What is it?
I thought I got a speeding ticket because it literally comes.
Her Majesty's.
It comes in a brown envelope,
right?
And I just finished speed school.
Oh, right.
And this brown envelope arrived. And
what do you mean speed school? You got a ticket?
I got a ticket.
Okay.
So I'd finished that. I got the points off my license. I thought, fine. And then another brown envelope.
Oh no!
Usually nothing good comes in a brown envelope. Yeah.
And then you open it, and it's from Her Majesty.
And what's the opening?
What's the opening? It says we're pleased to announce. It's all very formal and posh,
right?
But like on sort of just plain paper.
Oh, right.
But you've been awarded an OBE,
right?
But now you can't tell anybody for the next 5 months or whatever until it's announced. Yeah.
Oh, right. I'm surprised even. I suppose you've got to get ready for it. Is it like a wax seal, still wet, or is it not that? We moved on.
No. It's a brown envelope. That's all you get, and then you get the sort of the formal certification that comes in a great big sort of manila envelope, and all the paraphernalia that comes from Buckingham House.
And I know these are quite pedestrian questions, but do you have to buy a new suit? Is there a type of suit? Is it do they let you just?
Oh no, there's a dress code.
Yeah.
So you get this thing like the dress code. So yeah, it was an expensive month because you can take 3 people with you plus yourself. Nice. So it was like new suit.
Right, the whole
new outfit for my partner, and then my eldest and my youngest came. So they of course wanted the banker dad to pay up.
And what's the day? Quick, as an overview, you turn up.
So it was at Windsor Castle.
Yeah, it's at Windsor.
So you drive up the mile through Windsor Park to the castle, and then there's security that you got to go through security, drive into Windsor Castle, and then literally it's a whole process. So you're met, guided into where you go. You then have a sort of a lecture in terms of what's going to happen for the rest of the day. Then you're divided into so there's the MBE, OBEs, and then there's the nights. And the knighthoods and the dames go off to one room, and then the rest of us.
I don't like that, because you should be the king of the day to know that there's a tier of people.
Why
are these like walking past us into the queue first? Like we turn left and turn
the
right.
The platinum room. Ooh.
Yeah, so I was on the same day as Lenny Henry. So Lenny Henry went.
Oh, okay.
I'd prefer to be in that room. To be honest.
It would have been more fun.
Yeah,
but then you get in there. There's a glass of wine, and then you're told, and then you sort of follow one of the courtiers into this long sort of corridor room where you line up.
Yeah,
and then you work your way around, and when you get to sort of you walk into another room, and you're told this is what you got to do. So you have to walk to this point, turn, walk up to Her Majesty.
Oh right, okay.
Bow.
Yeah.
Then she'll have a little conversation with you.
Yeah.
Then you must walk backwards. Bow again. Then walk backward. Can't turn your back.
Yeah.
And then you have to walk across the angle the other way to exit the room. And then all the guests are in the rest of the hall there.
Did you rehearse walking backwards to make sure you
no.
got an angle like the wrong way?
But it was one of those things like when you're getting closer and closer to the front, you're going right, cross to the point, turn up, bow. Whatever you do, don't turn around and go back. And then the person in front of me turned their back and walked away.
Yeah.
Right, I'm not doing that, and I didn't. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, I would overthink that, because I would just be like, okay, you've got to walk 8 steps, you've got to bow. It's one of those things where I would overthink that and just end up doing a weird walk. Basically, it's.
And
then the Queen would be like, "Oh, poor lads, it's something.
It's his fault." Yeah.
No, there's something else.
It's the first thing I thought of. You'd overthink it and forget. And naturally, just turn around and walk.
Yeah.
And 3 steps in, you'd realise, oh no, do I now turn back?
Well, you could see that the person in front of me that turned and you could see as they were sort of going, oh crap, I've done it wrong. And then it's that dilemma: do I turn around? Do I not?
Do I commit?
Just carry on. Yeah.
Do I commit? Yeah.
Would you turn back round, Charles? Or would you...
I think I'd maybe do a little spin and then moonwalk out.
Only joking. What did the Queen say to you?
Actually, she was really impressive, because you think of the number of people that go through.
Yeah.
And I discovered this afterwards. She's briefed on everybody that's getting an award.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah. So before you go up, one of her equerries comes up and just whispers something. And so she came up and she said, it's really terrible, modern slavery, and I'm so grateful for what you and your organisation are doing. Encourage you to keep going, and all of that. And it's just like, for someone that was in their 90s, late 80s then, she was just completely switched onto it. Yeah.
It's a little personal touch.
Yeah.
And to keep switched on for every person, you'd think you'd start forgetting, even if somebody just whispered you, but to carry on. I suppose you've been doing that all your life, really, haven't you?
Yeah, my mum went to an audience with Princess Margaret.
Yeah.
And same thing is that they were there because their friend did some charity work. Same thing. And she was going, they did the meet and greet. And yes, and she said, well done with the mention the name of the organisation, and literally she was meeting hundreds of people in a line. She was briefed on everyone else.
And what did you receive your OBE for? What?
I think the official citation is for work in combating and eradicating modern slavery.
Oh. And what are the benefits? What can you now do? I think we've mentioned this before. Do you have to queue up in Marks and Spencer still?
Yes.
Waitrose?
Yes.
Surely not Sainsbury's.
No.
But doesn't it make, if you ever were to say, not that you would, but if you were ever to say, don't you know who I am? Like that gives it a bit more weight.
No, the only joy I get from it is when I go to the States, because
they don't know,
because it's royalty, because they understand it's something to do with royalty. So they go, do I have to call you sir? And I said, not only do you have to call me sir, but you have to bow.
Of course.
And then they, no, you don't.
I was listening.
Don't make eye contact as well.
No. I can't remember who it
was.
Don't
walk your back towards me.
I can't remember who the celebrity was, but he said he was there. Oh, it was Stephen Fry, I think it was. And he was there with Penn and Teller, and they were just meeting the Queen, the magicians, Penn and Teller.
That's a strange day.
And he was, who's the taller guy?
Penn?
Whoever the taller one is, he said, I said, listen, I'm not bowing to what do I do? Because I'm not bowing to him, blah, blah. I don't believe in all that. It's ridiculous, da, da, da. Anyway, so he said she was coming down the line, blah, 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 and he said I was more worried about like what he's going to say and he's not going to be, because he's quite he doesn't believe in that. He was saying like Americans we don't do all this.
So I think he's a libertarian dude as well. So
anyway, he said, so she came along, and then she came to him, and he said I automatically bowed, and then when she went on, he said to Stephen, he said, I can't believe I bowed. He said, I'm going to be so humiliated in my country. He said, I don't know why I did that. She said, she has that power over people. But he said, I just automatically did it. He said, it's just out of politeness. She was so nice.
It's kind of like, it's peer pressure, isn't it? You're in that situation when everybody else is doing it. It's really a strong person that's going to go, no, I'm not.
And it's a mark of respect, for the sort of office and institution, even if you don't necessarily believe in it. It's like taking your shoes off if you go to a mosque, or covering your head if you go to a synagogue or whatever. You might not necessarily be a member of that faith, but you're showing respect to the to the institution. You're showing respect to the premises. So.
Oh, talking of showing respect, I completely forgot. I meant to say to you something. There's a reason why I'm dressed in this, but I'll go into it afterwards. And the reason I haven't shaved, but we should have a little extras show we can put out. But I did want to apologise for the way I'm dressed. I'll explain to you after the show. It was a funny night, so I had about 45 minutes sleep. So if I was worried, I thought I'd better tell you in case I yawn, because it was a really bad night. Anyway, so somebody I'm going to have on the show, I said this to him. I like meeting human beings like you because you're doing it. You're not a celebrity because of it. You're not going to be a multi-millionaire because of it. You're one of those people that are actually doing something that matters. And it's more of a privilege to meet people like you than people that have got a lot of accolade for doing these big things, because your stuff really, really matters. So when I heard... I listened to a few things that you did, and I stopped myself, as I was saying to Charles before the show, because I wanted to hear you fresh. So if you just explain what you do, Unseen, what that is quickly.
So I founded a charity called Unseen, which is an anti-slavery charity. So we do 5 main things. So we work with victims of modern slavery that are found in the UK, offering everything from accommodation to support to helping them reintegrate back into society. We work with all what we call the major blue light agencies, so everything from the National Crime Agency, Border Force, to all the way down to the Bobby on the beat. We work with businesses, helping them tackle modern slavery and forced labour in their supply chains. We run the UK's Modern Slavery Helpline, which is a 24/7, 365 helpline for victims, businesses, police, nurses, general public. Victims to call in terms of help, get me out of this situation. The public to go, I've seen something, it's not quite right. And we use all of that frontline sort of interaction with the issue to try and work with governments and improve legislation and policy and process.
So you work with all of them, because there's always a thing of like who deals with it. They can phone that number and you sort of sort it out. And it's not I know there's a problem. It's I don't want to waste your time, but I think maybe that you can take.
It can be both. It could be somebody that
something more explicit.
Yeah, I've seen this going on and everything else, and I want to report it. Or it's I've got concerns about this, and often what we say to people is, when you got that gut feeling that it's not, something's not right here. I'm uncomfortable with it. We just say, look, call us. It may be nothing, and in most cases it is nothing, but that's fine. But what if your call, and we have had these calls, we had one call that literally, as it unraveled, it led to over 200 people being set free.
Oh, really?
So it is just, sometimes it is just that, something's not right here.
I think things like that can be important because it's sort of intelligence, on the ground sort of intelligence kind of things. And it sort of gives you a bit more of an idea of what's sort of going on in different areas.
Yeah, it's eyes and ears, isn't it, in terms of what's
going on. Can I
ask,
what was the call, the gist of the call? What's been seen?
I think originally it started with they had concerns about the comings and goings of people from a house.
Right, okay.
So everybody left at the same time, got into a van, disappeared all day, came back late at night, always the same people, never went out, no interaction, the curtains were always drawn. And I think it was just a neighbour that just said,
the movement of people,
something not right here.
Now, the story I stopped myself listening to, you spoke about the fact of there was a big tall guy that worked somewhere. Can you explain his story? Because it's not like a young girl that was.
Yeah, and I call him Robert. That's not his real name.
Okay, yeah.
So it was 5 a.m. in the morning, and there was a police raid onto a farm in Cambridgeshire, and we were part of the operation. So we were there for when the police brought people back who they suspected were victims of trafficking and forced labour, to work with them, to assure them that they weren't in trouble, that there was help and support for them, and everything else. So the raid took place at 5 a.m. The police brought them back. We started talking with them. I can't remember the numbers. It was 20, 30, 40 people, something like that. And we spoke with them all day, and none of them would give up any information. I mean, you could tell that they were terrified. Yeah. They were grateful, for food and a drink and all of that. And then they started going, yeah, but we're not earning. And you could. It wasn't beyond just I'm going to miss a day's pay. It was like there's consequences to me not earning in that whole process. And we kept working with them all throughout the day. And after about 12 hours, this guy Robert and an older woman came up and said, "Let us tell you what's really going on." And what had happened is they'd been recruited, they'd been brought to the UK to work on a farm. The farm wasn't abusing them. The farm was paying them all the legitimate wages and all of that. The abuse was taking place away from the farm. And they were under the control of a gangmaster who controlled where they lived, controlled how they got to the farm, had control of their bank accounts. So they would be paid money directly into their bank accounts. And then they would empty the bank accounts of all the money. Okay. And then they would use the money, use the bank accounts to money launder from other criminal activity. And then the women were also then sexually exploited at night. So they were sold, they were pimped out at night. So this all happened. And because of the intelligence around the operation, the farm had guaranteed their jobs back. One of the major banks had guaranteed them new bank accounts and all of this whole process. But what it taught me was the level of control that people have over other people, to the fact that they won't share that information. So, and also there was new housing for them as well. So new housing, new job, everything that they thought they were coming to, that they got was guaranteed for them. But it took all of that. Yeah. And so at the end of this, when they started giving up that information, their concerns were, will the gangmasters come after us? Yeah. And the police said, no, we've already arrested them. They're all arrested on that. And, even then, taking the next step in saying, actually, this is actually what happened, was a huge sort of step of courage. But the bit that always got me, I mean, this guy was 6'6" and built like a brick house. You would not want to meet him on a rugby pitch. It was just I used to play rugby. It would end badly. When we rehoused him, we then went and sort of got provisions for them and handed them over. And as we were leaving, he stood in the door and he said to me, "Can you guarantee that I'm going to be safe?" And he was petrified. And I just, 6'6", you could kick the crap out of anybody. And yet this is what the mentality exploitation does to you. Yeah. He was just broken as an individual.
Is that because people feel that because were they here illegally? But
legally.
They were here legally.
Legally.
Oh. That is the
And most people are. Most people think, okay, you're talking about small boats crossings, or you came in the back of a container.
But people don't know people who don't know their rights. People who maybe aren't
bank accounts.
People who technically aren't here, in a legal status or whatever. Maybe aren't here to, don't have a right to work or whatever. But so they fall through gaps and they feel like they can't go to the authorities.
He had applied to what he thought was a legitimate ad in Eastern Europe. So he applied for this job. And they said, "Yeah, we've got this job on the farm." True. He's then moved from overseas to here, thinking it's going to be a $40 coach ticket. And he arrives to find that, well, no, actually it's $4,000. And you can't pay that.
Yeah.
You have to live here, and the rent is more each week than he earns.
Right.
And so the debt burden builds up.
Yeah.
And I'm mashing a couple of stories here, but the exploiters will use all sorts of means of control. They'll go, "Oh, look at my phone. Isn't that your mother?
Yeah.
Look at the date.
Yeah.
You step out of line, she gets it.
Yeah.
Or is that your
kill them with
partner,
love for
or is
other
that
people?
your child, or all of that? Oh, you're now in debt. You owe me this money. You've got to pay it off," and they never pay the debt off.
Yeah.
And then they might play, "Oh, you came in on a a worker's visa to do this type of job, but now I've got you doing this. You've breached your visa. If you say anything, the police will arrest you.
Yeah.
Or it's as crude as violence.
Right. Yeah.
They'll just beat the crap out of them if you step out of line.
I knew a guy that used to do removals, and there was a guy that worked there. I won't say his name, but a Romanian guy, and he said when he came over, he was in the car washes. They had him doing car wash. I can't remember how much he was getting a day, but it was ridiculous. They said he'd have his own flat, and there was like 8 of them, and then the money kept going up. And he said he was a very proud, hardest worker I've ever, and I've worked hard. And I remember him as being the hardest working bloke. And he said I'd borrowed so much money. He said he borrowed money from his school teacher, like people in the local. He said because people come up to where they were in the hills and things, and they're showing the big car, and they're showing you pictures of thing and the job. And he said I was borrowing money from this person. Oh yeah, we're going to go to England. The thing. I said I came in and I was working on the car washes for whatever it was. And he said then there was like 6 of us in a room, and they're saying, "No, I owed money for this, this, and this, and this." And I felt so bad for him. He said, "But it just lied. We don't know. Somebody comes over and shows you pictures and a nice Mercedes Benz out there." He said they had a woman that came up. "Oh, look, this amazing stuff. We're going to sort you out property, blah blah blah." He said you get so caught up in it. He said, "But one of the reasons I didn't go just try and get back," he said, I'd borrowed so much money to go over. I was embarrassed.
Yeah,
I didn't want to go back and say, "Look, sorry, I've got nothing." Like the embarrassment killed him. And that was he's a tough guy as well. I thought, I just feel so bad for him.
But we also, I remember colleagues coming back once. They'd been on a what the police call problem profiling. So they were visiting car washes just to sort of get a feel for what was going on. And they'd come across a bunch of Slovakians who had been paid £3 a day. I mean, working 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., £3 a day. There were 27 of them living in a loft.
In a loft.
And they talked about hot bedding. We talk about hot desking. That was hot bedding because, and this, I think this is the way to understand what modern slavery is, because people go, is it this or is it this one? I said, look, there's loads of technical definitions and they're important, for the law, but to try and help someone understand what we're talking about, what it is you take a human being and you turn them into a commodity. And the exploiter is nothing more than an illicit commodity trader, and their commodity is a human being.
Yeah.
And they look at that commodity and go, how am I going to get the maximum amount of profit out of that commodity? Yeah. And it is, I will just exploit them and in multiple ways. So that, they may exploit them by inserting them into a legitimate workplace or not in a legitimate workplace. They won't pay them appropriately. They'll use their bank accounts. They'll use them for benefit fraud. If you can exploit them during the day in work and exploit them during the night in the sex trade, great, because, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And if you've got their name in the bank account, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff you could earn money from.
Oh, yeah, no, they'll use it for other criminal activity as well.
Just siphoning out anything.
Take a loan or whatever, you can take,
I was surprised when you said about the bank account. I thought, they've got bank accounts.
Yeah. But he'd come from a legitimate job and it was all set up. But if you're an exploiter and you can access a legitimate bank account, happy days.
Oh, that's crazy, isn't it? And do you know what happened after with him?
I don't know the end of the story, other than I left him, he was fine, and he was assured that his job was there tomorrow, and all his lost earnings were going to be repaid to him as well.
No,
so he was in a good place. So
who would that have come from? The employer or a bank, or what would that have?
I can't remember.
So did you literally have to go to the bank and say, look, this is their situation, this is what we are?
So the police operation set all of that up. So intelligence is gathered.
Yeah.
They understood that bank accounts were being used illegally.
Yeah.
So, they would monitor those bank accounts.
Yeah.
So, payday, money goes into all of these accounts. Same day, all the money goes out. And it started raising those red flags. And so it's about joining all the dots. And what we often say to police and any of these investigations is the first thing you start is a financial investigation.
Yeah.
It's got to follow the money. Where does the money go? Because that's what this trade is about. It's just people are used as the means of making money.
Yeah. So, and the thing with the bank account and somewhere to go and all that, that's pre-set up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because that would be the big thing of like, well, there's no point helping me, and I've got nowhere to go when I've got no money. But
that was a sort of archetypal, that's how an operation should take place, which is you recognise that what you've got in front of you are victims who are terrified.
Yeah.
And this is why police work with charities like Unseen and others, which is we're there to de-escalate and to address their fears and to reassure them.
Yeah.
And try and get them to a place where they feel comfortable then telling the police what's gone on.
Yeah.
And assuring them that they're not going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so glad when it said, well, we've got you somewhere to go when you got the thing. I thought, oh, God, that's, you're not, like you said, even though it seems common sense, but until you think about, these aren't people that snuck into, that they're victims. You're looking at a victim of something, so you can't just pick them up and say, well, help us. Yeah. You're there to save them, sort of thing. What did you do? What was your work career leading up to this? Where were you born?
I was born in Leeds. I'm a Yorkshireman.
Right, okay.
To Lancastrian parents. So I support Yorkshire Cricket Club and Liverpool Football Club. So I play both sides of the penalty.
Okay.
So my geography, I wasn't educated that well. So Leeds part of Yorkshire?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. I didn't even realise. Okay.
Yeah. It's actually the capital of the country. It's kind of like the War of the Roses hasn't finished yet. London's got it on sort of temporary license.
Oh, yeah. Chicago used to be the capital of America. Did you know that?
Did it?
Yeah, and they took, I think it was the 1700s. Okay. What was the reason? I've forgotten. So you were born there.
Yeah.
Where did you went to school up north?
No, my father was a vicar in the Church of England, so I lived all over. So I lived in from Leeds to London to Singapore to South Korea.
Oh
wow! And then I lived on an American compound. So I came back to this country.
Why did you use the word compound?
That's what it was called.
Oh, it just seemed a bit harsh. No, you weren't held in it, was you?
No.
Okay, right.
I mean, I lay claim to the coolest birthday party ever.
Yeah.
Which is on the flight deck of one of the US aircraft carrier.
Okay.
I mean, top that.
Yeah, you win.
I win.
You win.
I mean,
you win birthdays.
Yeah.
Birthdays.
That's all. It's that whenever it's that round in the game, you know you're going to win.
Yeah.
You play your joke.
Me and Charles have been to the Wimpy on our birthdays.
I never had a McDonald's. I was too poor for McDonald's birthday. That's so bad.
So, and then where did you? It's just schooling, university. What happened after?
Came back to this country, then lived in Glasgow, and then spent my sort of secondary school years in Sevenoaks in Kent.
Why are you moving around so much?
Just because my dad was. Yeah, I'm what's called a third culture kid.
Oh, okay.
So it's like wherever I am is home.
Right.
So
if you had to remove Yorkshire as your main home, what is next in place as your next? What did you spend most time? Youth? What?
Probably Sevenoaks in Kent, but
okay.
I don't think that way. Like when people say where's home, it's like where I am,
where your hat is.
That's all. It's that strange things that I like airports. And it's a thing. It's an actual thing. Third culture kids.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that.
Yeah, I know, but it's just because I spent so much time just going through airports. Yeah. So I have an insatiable appetite to travel.
Yeah. Okay.
And sort of see myself as sort of a world citizen. I'm not really like
endeavour. Every time you feel the doors open of an airport, it feels like here we go again, sort of thing.
Yeah, but now it's got to be trains because environmentally
right,
friendly.
Of course, yeah. So when did the professional career? How did that start?
So I left university. I joined Marks and Spencer on their.
Any thought of a career in the parish or anything?
No,
just didn't work.
It was the absolute last thing I wanted to do. So my life plan was do business and then go into politics.
Oh, okay.
So that's when you're 16 and you're at school, like so Wallis, what do you want to do with your life? I went to one of those schools where you had to sort of explain what you're going to do with your life. And I said, I want to work in business till I'm about 40 and then go into politics. And that didn't happen. But I worked in business to start with. So I worked Marks and Spencer's, then I worked for London Electricity, which is now E.ON.
Okay.
So I was a business analyst there. And then I went and worked for a church. How did that happen?
Yeah,
So I did that, which ultimately led me to Bristol, which, and I think, if I look back, there's a constant theme that runs through my life, which is about social justice.
Yeah.
Hence the Observer paper.
Oh, right. Okay.
Around that.
Oh, okay.
But I've always, when kids are growing up and they go, that's not fair. I don't think I ever grew out of that's not fair. Yeah. That whenever I see things that are unfair, it just really riles me.
Yeah.
And all of that. So in Bristol, I was leading a church. We were really involved in trying to address problems within homelessness and drugs, etc. And the reason I then left that to start Unseen was a colleague of mine. I'd been to Ukraine way back, and then a colleague of mine went on another trip to Ukraine, and he came back and he said, I've got a weird story to tell you. And I said, okay, hit me. I've been to Ukraine.
When's this?
This would have been 96, 97.
Oh, okay, right back then. Okay.
No, sorry. Decade out. 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
He'd gone, he was speaking at a conference. Then afterwards, they were just in the hotel they were staying. They were just having a drink in the bar. And this woman walked in and said, "Are you the people that I'm meant to meet?" And they went, "No. Who are you looking for? You're trying to be helpful." And she said, "Oh, I'm responding to this ad in the paper." And I said, "Oh, show us the ad." And the ad was for a job in Central Park in New York, selling ice cream, paying $80,000 a year. Yeah, and your reaction?
Yeah, red flags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought this was a proper thing until he said that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. One of the people on the team was actually from the States and was ex-FBI and knew all about human trafficking.
Oh, right.
And he said, "This is just a complete setup. That there is no job selling ice cream for $80,000 in New York. If you follow this ad and meet the people that you think you're meant to be meeting, I can tell you what's going to happen. You'll be trafficked into sexual exploitation in the US." Because back then there was a massive, from Ukraine it's topical, isn't it? Ukraine and other Eastern European countries, there was huge exodus of women and girls just disappearing, and it was all into sexual exploitation, and a lot was going to the States.
People were desperate, weren't they? The economy was
because they'd just come out of the Soviet era. And so she said, "Well, I've spent all my savings again on buying this ticket to go to New York." And they clubbed together and paid her off and said, "Look, don't ever respond to these ads again. Just leave, and here's a bit extra to get you home," and all of that. And just at that moment, her trafficker came in, or the potential trafficker came in and said, "No, she's not leaving unless you pay me."
Yeah.
So they said, "You leave and we'll pay you." And so they paid them, and he left. And they thought that was it. About half an hour later, the trafficker came back with the local police and tried to extract more money because the police were part of in on the trafficking and all of that. And they just said no and fronted up, and they backed down. And then they all decided that they were going to have to leave pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that was the story that came back, and I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
That is just a weird story, And then another friend of mine, we had also worked in Ukraine with the social orphan problem, which is again has sort of come to light in the whole conflict. And she came back. Literally, this is about 4 months later. Came into my office and said, "I've got a weird story to tell you." And I went, "Oh, here we go again." And she said, "We've been really worried about what happens to these kids when they leave the orphanage at 16, and we've been trying to work out, like, could we create a program from 16 to 21 to get them through university, give them more life chances and everything else." I remember having a very bizarre conversation with the Foreign Office saying, "Look, we'll raise funds in the UK in order to fund these kids through into Ukraine universities." And they said, "If you move any money from the UK to the Ukraine, we'll be all over you." Exactly. I'm just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But that's it. But she said, we started asking the authorities, what happens to these kids at 16? And they just would not answer us. And we pushed and pushed and pushed. And eventually they said, well, what happens is they either leave and end up as drug addicts or as prostitutes, or they get into the back of traffickers' cars and are never seen again.
Bloody hell.
So there's like trafficking.
Yeah.
And then I saw, it's a bit like, when you buy a new car and you think, I'm the only one that's got this car. And then every other sucker on the road's bought the same car as you in the same colours. Like, how did that happen? I just started seeing very occasional articles in the press about trafficking and everything else. And then I just came across an article that was, again, looking historically at trafficking from Eastern Europe to the US. And what it said was that the traffickers, in order to avoid detection at the major hub airports, Heathrow or Frankfurt or Paris, they were using the regional airports in the UK because back then they had direct flights into US as well. But they didn't go into JFK. They went into the back of beyond.
Yeah.
All about avoiding detection in that whole process. And one of the airports that was named was Bristol, where I live. Oh. So I then did what I thought was normal, which was I wrote to every single member of the council, because we were already working with the council, all the MPs and the chief constable, going, look, I've had these two stories from Ukraine. I've seen something in the press, and now this story. What's going on? How can we help? And that ultimately led, to cut a very long story short, to a meeting with a really senior police officer who came and had a 4-hour meeting
in Bristol.
In Bristol.
Yeah.
came into my office and he said, right, I'm going to tell you what's really going on. And he spent about 4 hours lifting a lid off Bristol and then off the UK and telling me about trafficking. And back then, he said, we think we know of 75 residential properties that are being used as brothels where every single person in that brothel is trafficked. And all we can do currently is kick the door in, arrest the victims for being here illegally or in breach of our antiquated laws around sex work, or for visa defaults. He said, it's the last thing I want to do. I know they're victims.
Yeah.
We then put them in a B&B or in a hotel to try and keep them safe whilst we begin the investigation. And overnight, without fail, they just abscond. Yeah. And we know they go straight back to their traffickers and are moved to a different part of the UK, and the process all happens again. So he was frustrated as a cop that first he was having to, arrest victims, because that's not why I joined to be a police. Yeah. And then I couldn't get the bad guys. And so all of this, end of the conversation, he said to me, look, if you want to create a stink by writing this letter, you've done that, because everybody's scrabbling around to try and answer the questions that you've raised. And, at least MPs, councillors and the chief were all talking to each other. You can retire happy if that's all you wanted to do. But then he said, but actually, what are you going to do? And I stupidly said, what do you need? And he said, I need a safe house. I need somewhere to put them safe where these victims can be cared for, so that we can then find out the real story of what's going on, so I can get the bad guys in that whole process. And for some reason, I just said, okay, I'll do that, one condition. You're my first trustee, because at this point, you know more than I do.
Right, yeah.
So he said, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Without any consultation, I was like, oh, what have you just done?
Yeah.
But because he was so senior, he was then able to get me into what was then called the Serious Crime Agency and the Home Office and everything else. And I'd been a management consultant previously. And so as I started looking into it, it was just, the response was chaotic. Yeah. And I was just like, this is nuts. We're not winning. And everybody was fighting amongst themselves in that whole process.
Right, yeah. Is that due to a lack of sort of an overarching plan or coordination? Is that due to all these different departments and organisations not communicating effectively? Or
it was kind of a mix of things. So some of it was turf wars. Some of it was just not an appreciation for the scale of the problem, not really knowing how the problem manifested itself. So back then, most of the conversations were around trafficking for sexual exploitation. That's what we thought what it was, and it was incredibly territorial. So I didn't want to set up unseen. I mean, the first thing, having a sort of agreed with this police officer, who's still a trustee, by the way, that we were going to do this. I then thought, hang on, no, we don't just need another charity, So I then sort of approached all the other charities, and politely they told me to bog off and go away. So I said, fine, okay, I'm just going to get on with it, because I can see a need in front of me. And I think policing just weren't aware of it. There were little indicators. Do you remember Morecambe Bay, the Chinese cockle pickers?
Yeah.
So that was kind of sort of known about, but not huge in terms of understanding forced labour exploitation.
Every now and then you have a big story. I mean, that was that awful thing with the Vietnamese people in the container ship. It has to be very, very bad, unfortunately, before it reaches.
And that wasn't trafficking; that was people smuggling, which is different.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
that's just taking money to get them here, sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. and this is really interesting, which is. We, the sector, has spent the last 10 years saying, look, trafficking is not smuggling. Right. If you're a smuggler, I pay you to get me across an international border, and that's it. It's that's the transaction. And yes, I'm incredibly vulnerable because I'm trusting you, and that you as a smuggler could sell me on to a trafficker. Yeah. But in the vast majority of cases, that is the transaction. Yeah. So everything that's going on in the channel, the vast majority of that is smuggling. It's not trafficking. So the government keep calling it trafficking, but it's not. And I keep telling them off on Twitter. Listen, I keep offering them free lessons. I'll teach you what the definitions are. Trafficking is, at its simplest, it is the recruitment and the movement of someone that is deceptive for the purposes of exploitation.
Right, okay. Oh, it's this deceptive thing.
Yeah, and movement can be from one side of the street to another. It doesn't have to be across an international border.
But there is overlap within those two.
Yeah, smuggling can lead into trafficking.
Yeah.
And traffickers will say, and we know this, they will get them up to Calais and say, right, especially with Vietnamese, your job now is to get across that border, get across the channel. The only thing you need to remember is this mobile number. And when you get in the UK, ring this mobile number and we'll come and get you.
Okay.
Has it changed in the last 10 years, the smuggling or the trafficking rather? Or is it still following the same lines?
Or another way of asking the question is, has it got worse or has it got better or has it grown? I don't know, because I don't think we ever knew what the base numbers were.
It's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah,
because these are people who are...
It's a hidden crime.
The people below the radar. So it's
we think, with a high level degree of certainty, that at any one time in the UK there are in excess of 100,000 victims of slavery.
In a modern day, I mean, it is appalling.
Cameras, phones, what do
you think? Still, what should apparently be a civilized society, like it's still in the G7, still one of the richest countries in the world, and just it is staggering. Yeah.
So if somebody is being trafficked, they could call your organisation and say, look, I don't know anything, but this is where I am and somebody will turn up, or what
usually happens if a victim calls, say, the helpline, is they'll call up and say, I'm calling about my mate Paul.
Oh, right.
And it can be in one of 200 languages. We can deal with any language. And, and we discover over a number of calls what's happened to Paul.
Yeah.
I went with this person. I was promised a job. I arrived. The job wasn't there. And now I'm being forced to do something else, and I don't get paid. And there's threats against me. On and on. By about call number 6, 7, 8, they go, "I'm Paul."
Right. Yeah.
Oh. And then the question was, so do you want to leave that situation? And some do, and some don't. And you can't force anybody. It's a confidential helpline. We're not tracking where the phone calls come from. We're not the police. We're not, and we maintain our independence. And some of them will say, "Yeah, I want to leave." And this is the other sort of like, they're not chained up at night, and all the controls are psychological in that whole process. And over a series of calls, they may say, "Yeah, I'm ready to leave." So, and then we work with them. Where do you want to go? And some of them go, I want to go to the police. And so we will then liaise with the police and the victim and say, okay, and they'll have phones. So we'll send you the address. You can Google map it to your phone. Go to this police station, and this is the officer's name and number and they're waiting for you.
Right, yeah.
And they'll do that. Others will meet a police officer in a neutral location. Others don't want to go anywhere near the police, so we liaise with NGOs around the country in that whole process.
I was thinking as you were saying about them calling, I would imagine the first few calls are them just tiptoeing around. Am I going to get in trouble? What's the thing? Is this real?
They're testing it out, yeah. Are you going to refer me to immigration enforcement? No, and all of that.
Hang up the phone,
Others, literally, we have had calls where people go, I've got 30 minutes and you've got to get me out of this situation.
Wow.
And because we're plugged into all the police forces, we can get somebody there. And
they just crack at that time so that you've got to come.
I think the quickest we've done it in is something like 17 minutes, literally from call to the person being extracted out of the property that they were in.
From the outside, it seems it has some of the trappings of domestic abuse, sort of. The mentality and you were saying this threat of violence, this sort of beating people down, but mental abuse as well, and like it seems to sort of have just from an outsider, it seems to have some of those things you're talking about, sort of rescue homes and stuff and safe places away and people calling up, and it seems to be the same thing with sort of domestic abuse charities, a similar sort of psychology.
It is. I mean, there's a form of modern slavery called domestic servitude. So, someone that is forced to work or be the childminder. And it is almost sort of Harry Potter-esque. The number of stories I've heard from victims where, I had to live in the cupboard under the stairs, or I had to sleep under the kitchen table, and I was only fed the scraps from the table. It's as stark as that.
Yeah.
But I think the exploitation that people encounter is horrific, And whether we call it domestic, we call it these things so that we can segment it and deal with it. But fundamentally, it's about destroying an individual. So in a domestic abuse case, it's the constant belittling and control and fear that just diminishes that person.
Yeah.
And then they've got to deal with the trauma of all of that. Same for the victims of modern slavery. And just as within domestic abuse, there are people that lose their lives. So there are with modern slavery, and it is. I think part of it is, I think there are different psychological drivers. And with modern slavery, it is all about making money. So the exploiter looks at, if I was an exploiter, I would look at you and go, there is my cash cow, and I will exploit you as much as I can. I've met victims, that started in one form of abuse and then another form of abuse and another form of abuse until they were no longer economically viable. And then they're kicked out. And it's the litany of violence, and it's the litany of control and the dehumanizing of that. And I remember I talked with a psychologist once. I said, help me understand what happens to the human psyche when they realize they're nothing other than a commodity and they've lost all volition and control. And it's catastrophic for us as human beings to be in that situation because you're devoid of hope.
Yeah.
PTSD gets banded around, but my colleagues that are on the front line deal with people that are suffering PTSD as a base minimum.
Yeah.
We kind of go, oh, PTSD, oh yeah, and we have to remind ourselves, no, actually, that's quite traumatic. That's where people are at. And one of the things I say to my colleagues on the front line is, our job is not to rescue people, and it's not to save people. Our job is to help people walk with a limp for the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
because that is the reality. Yeah, because you don't leave that behind.
Right. Yeah. That sort of echo is going to be around them a long, long time. Yeah. Do you? How did the? Because I'd seen the Modern Slavery Act over the last few years pop up. How did that come about?
So back to the OBE. So in 2011, I had a friend that worked for a think tank up here in London, and I said, look, I think this is the biggest social justice issue that this country is facing and doesn't know about. And I sort of badgered them for sort of 2 years to say, look, will you please look at this issue? And because they were looking at issues of poverty and deprivation and everything else. And eventually they agreed, and then they turned around and said, we want you to do it. So I spent 2 years with a team going the length and breadth of the country. I think we spoke to about 200 organizations and individuals. We published a report in March 2013 called It Happens Here. And we just got super lucky. I mean, we were headline news for a 24-hour news cycle. So I remember sitting in Broadcasting House at 5 a.m. doing the first interview, which was responding to the government's response to our report, which said modern slavery is here in the UK. We had also called it modern slavery, so that's the first time terminology had been used in this country. And the reason we agonized over whether we should, because of the sensitivity around the transatlantic slave trade. But we said it's not chattel slavery, but it's just morphed and it's changed and all of that. And I joke in the States, because around the same time Obama was at the Global Clinton Foundation and said, human trafficking, let's call it what it is, modern slavery. So the joke is, who came first, Obama or me? But, so depending who you're talking to in the States, you get one side or the other. But so we published this report with 80 recommendations, but basically it said the UK is failing. It doesn't understand the scale of the problem, and the response is not proportionate to the problem. The first government response to it, and I remember sitting in a cubicle, listening to what the government minister was saying.
When was this roughly?
This is 2013.
2013. Okay.
And he just said, we think the government's response is adequate. And the reporter came to me, and you know that moment, in football, it's an open goal, and you go, It's an open goal.
Yeah.
But you really, but you have to bear it. You know what I mean? There suddenly becomes that pressure.
Yes,
Okay.
don't sky it. Or scuff your shot.
Don't hit the post.
And all of that. And I said, that's great to hear the government's response like that, but this report is a landmark report with 80 recommendations that would argue completely differently. Yeah. And it was like, I've scored that. By midday, the government had changed its response to, we take the report very seriously. We're going to look into all these recommendations. That report went in. 8 weeks later, I was in the Cabinet office with the Cabinet. And Theresa May said, based on this report, we're going to do a Modern Slavery Act. And then I lost 2 years of my life to Westminster, just working from a bill to an act. And then we led, as Unseen, we led on the issue of saying, actually, globally. Remember I said earlier, when I started Unseen, all the thinking around trafficking was primarily around trafficking for sexual exploitation. That's in the UK, that accounts for about a quarter of all victims. The vast majority are in forced labour situations. And so we said business has a crucial role to play with this. So we championed what was called transparency in supply chains, which required businesses to tell every year what they were doing to tackle modern slavery.
And what does if you had a company and you wanted to have that on there, that you're a party of that, what is the process of being certified, whatever?
It's not a certification, so it's a legal requirement. So you know how companies have to report certain things. Yeah. So it says every year any large company, and the definition of a large company is 36 million plus turnover globally, not in the UK. So it's not based on your sales in the UK. It's based on your global sales. And if you have a UK footprint, you must produce a report every year detailing all the steps that you are taking to tackle modern slavery in your supply chains.
And what would be the basics of that?
Most reports in the first year were, we've got these. We think modern slavery is a really bad thing. Oh, good. No shit, Sherlock. Yeah. We've got these policies and these procedures, and then this is what we're doing to investigate, and this is what we found. And, it's been patchy. We've had some businesses that have really lent into it and said, we've really gone and looked for it, and we found it in our supply chains in that whole process. And we've got, companies that still haven't. There's still about 19,000 companies are caught by the legislation just in the UK. In excess of 100,000 companies worldwide are caught by the legislation. There are still 5,500, maybe 5,600 companies in the UK that have never produced a report. And so, in the Queen's speech, most bigger companies have. So, in the Queen's speech that's just been, the government have announced a new modern slavery bill.
Oh yeah.
And they're going to significantly upgrade the requirements on businesses to report.
So it's not so casual as we've got an email address.
They're going to have fines and everything else. Yeah. Right, you have to produce the report. If you have a website, you have to put a link to that report on the front page of your website.
Yeah.
But now you've got the investor community are really concerned about the lax response, but saying actually this is a really important issue.
Yeah.
And so there's a campaign called Votes Against Slavery. So investors to the tune of £9.4 trillion assets under management are leaning on companies to say, you need to do more.
Yeah.
You need to tell us more.
Yeah.
Because this is all about due diligence. Yeah. And then there's another investor group that have got a campaign called Find It, Fix It, Repair It, and saying it's not enough to say you've got a policy.
Right, yeah.
Well, you had a policy back then, you've done nothing in between.
Right.
Because it is meant to be a sort of, these are the steps that we took this year.
Yeah.
These are the things that we're going to do in the future.
It needs to be actively enforced and investigated.
Yeah, and so the government said it's going to do that. We'll see. I mean, the government could have taken any of those companies to court and said, you must produce a report.
When you said that you produced the information to the government for the first time and they went, there's not a big problem. What is that, just laziness? I mean, there's nothing to be gained from, is it just less hassle for them to, why would they say?
They do. I mean, sorry. They do seem to interrupt. They do seem to. They do seem to ignore a lot of things. I mean, this is what governments do. They say, "Well, what are you going to do about global warming?" And they're like, "It's not really a problem.
It's just bat it away."
What are you going to do about the cost of living crisis? It's not really that much of a problem. What are you going to do about Brexit? It's not really that much of a problem. What are you going to do about Ukraine? So it's a way of not. If you don't acknowledge that this,
it's just less
big
hassle
problem is actually a big problem.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to do much.
I think it's one of those political ones that is just like too difficult to deal with, because it's the issue is so entrenched in our society. So can I ask you 3 questions?
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask you one question and then I'll ask you 3 questions.
Okay.
All right, I'll ask you both the same
right,
question.
right.
Okay. So the headline question is, how many slaves work for you? So I'm going to ask you 3 questions to tease it out.
Yeah.
So, do you eat food?
Oh, right, I think I see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Thankfully, you're wearing clothes.
Yeah.
Even, you know.
Yeah.
That's where my head went. I thought, well, clothes.
Yeah. And you both got a cell phone, mobile phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, if not 2. Yeah.
Both guilty, Charles, on all fronts.
Yeah. Well,
So you've answered positive to all 3. So without trying, you are probably personally connected to between 40 and 60 slaves.
So 2 days ago, I'm not making this, I keep going on about someone I was with, and I bought a T-shirt, said Bangladesh. Every single time I buy one, I look and I see the number, and it says Bangladesh. I said to her, that shouldn't be that cheap. And I haven't got a lot of money, but I shouldn't be paying that a little amount of money. As I said to her in the shop, somebody else is paying for this T-shirt to get that cheap for me. And it's a guilt. Like, this was 2 days ago.
And I have to say that your question, as soon as you said that, how many slaves work for you? Well, I thought clothes, and I thought the fact that I bought a T-shirt for whatever, £5, £6 or whatever in Tesco's. Yeah. Obviously, someone's being exploited for that. You can't pay a decent wage. Yeah. Someone isn't getting a decent wage, and I know that. And I'm a terrible person. I know that, and I still buy the T-shirt for £6. Do you know what I mean?
So why do you do that?
Because it's £6.
Yeah.
So because it's cheap.
And this is where I'm the poacher turned gamekeeper. Because, like I said, I started working for M&S.
Oh, right.
Quite a while ago now. So back then, M&S and others, it was all about quality. And you'd buy a T-shirt, and that T-shirt would last you 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
Buy a T-shirt now, for some manufacturers, it's wear it once and throw it away.
Yeah.
I've been to India and some of those factories that make our clothes, and I've been to the good ones because that's the ones you get taken to.
Yeah.
and you walk out of that like with a complete respect for the goods that you buy, because you see that. But even before that factory, like a T-shirt, it's who picked the cotton, and then who spun the cotton, and then who dyed the cotton, and then who cut the cloth, and then who knitted it.
Because you automatically think of factory onwards, but it's
all the way back.
Genuinely, when you said that, I was thinking about the conversations I had with people when they're buying stuff and going, look, how can I pay for that? Like, I've had that conversation again and again just the other day. What are the options?
So what I say was, it's back to who educated whom, and retailers have educated the customers. And the reason that modern slavery exists is we are addicted to cheap goods and cheap services and cheap labor.
Yeah.
But we've become addicted to those things. And so actually, it will be a generational shift to make people value things again.
Right.
And it's a really hard message. But, we're living in a cost of living crisis. And, people go, you're talking from a position of privilege. Yes and no. But retailers will say, but the customer demands cheap. And I go to the retailers, but you educated them about cheap.
Yeah.
And you de-educated them around value. And so people don't, where's this come from? Oh, this came from a field where probably children were, I'm not saying this year, but, in a lot of instances, children were forced to pick the cotton. And then it went to a spin mill where, the conditions are horrendous. And on and on. And, we're seeing all this problem with Uyghurs in China, which was one of the major cotton producing areas of the world, and the exploitation that's taking place there. Well, if we're serious about it, we need to help people understand who made my clothes, who farmed my food, and actually, is cheap what we want if it means that our fellow human being is being exploited. Yeah. And, there's some preliminary work being done in terms around, well, actually, what would happen if we paid a decent wage all the way down the supply chain and we adhered to the principles of what's called decent work? It's a UN standard around that. What actually happens? And the concern in the West is, a T-shirt would be £50. No, it wouldn't. With one major brand, a pair of jeans would go up by about 20 cents. Now that's a benefit of globalization because you're just buying in such huge quantities. Right, the cost burden is shared. But to me, that's almost like an irrelevance. What happens at the factory floor? And they looked at one factory in Bangladesh. And they said, okay, if we paid in that factory a contextualized living wage and we adhered to all the principles of decent work, what happens? In an instant, the children don't need to work and they can go back to school. And we know all the educational benefits that come from staying in school longer. And ultimately, it's economic uplift for that country much quicker, which means actually the risk to vulnerability is much lower. So, I want to end forced labor exploitation. Let's get the economy up. So kids stop working. But what also happens is productivity goes up and quality goes up. And so you're almost creating a win-win-win.
Yeah.
Now can you afford 20 cents?
Yeah.
Or you say to the retailers, you can swallow that 20 cents because I know what your profit margins are.
Yeah, you think, and they think they'd want to promote that. Yeah. Is there, is it fair trade? Was that the food one, the fair trade?
Yep.
Was there questions around that, or wasn't exactly what it should have been or something? I'm sure.
No, look, fair trade was great because it was trying to say, let's get a fair wage.
I remember people going, no, I'm going to get that instead.
Yeah.
It's just things have moved on.
Yeah.
And actually people are wanting better standards.
Yeah.
And all of that. And other things have, like Rainforest Alliance or UTZ have come up as well. And it's just, it's like the bar's been raised.
Right.
And fair trade just need to play a little bit of catch up in that whole process.
Is there an ethical clothing fair trade sort of, there's nothing at the moment?
No, it's more niche.
Right.
So, you can...
Independent sellers.
Yeah, and if it's niche, inevitably it's more expensive because they haven't got the buying power. We need the major retailers to do this.
I'm surprised somebody hasn't broken ranks, a big company now, to go, right, this is our thing.
Well, typically a lot of these companies, like your Gaps and your Nikes or whatever, your high street places, I mean, they will have their model factory and they will say, look, here's our factory in wherever, in Vietnam, in Bangladesh, in Zimbabwe, or whatever. And it's fine, and it's lovely and clean, and it's new, and everyone is over 18, and everyone gets a decent wage, and all looks lovely, and it's health and safety and everything, and it looks like a factory in wherever, Ontario or Marseille or whatever, or sort of Lincolnshire. And then typically that's fine, and that's for the paperwork, and that's for everything, and for the videos online. But then typically they subcontract most of the work out to very, very shady places and to whoever the hell.
And they subcontract and they supply them.
And then it ends up with just all over the place. Yeah.
But it's not just Vietnam.
No.
It's Leicester.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there was a thing,
I think recently. Do you remember in the lockdown, when Boohoo?
Well, it comes back to, again, you've got to rejig what slavery is here. I know you don't want to absorb that, but it's back here again.
And so, if we look at victims in the UK, if it's kids, UK nationals are number one. And if it's adults, UK nationals are about third, fourth, fifth, depending, each quarter. So it's a problem that is both here. Yeah. It's a global problem. What are some of your... like that term, don't you? I saw you chuckling.
It's good. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I thought, it's good to learn that.
Charles thinks globally. He's more...
remember that one.
Do you... off the top of your head, who are some of the people that have really gone in for the Modern Slavery Act in England that you know of, to give them a little shout?
What, in terms of companies?
Yeah, who you go, these ones really took to it. I know it's still the sort of early stages-ish, but...
a lot of the supermarkets have.
Oh, okay.
If they were here, they would say, look, a medium-sized supermarket carries about 100,000 lines. So for us to be, back to your point, can I have a label that says I'm that? Yeah. We have to certify 100,000 lines in that whole process. Yeah. So it's a huge job. So what they've said is, look, where do we think the biggest risks are and all of that? And there's been issues within the, say, Thai fishing, prawns and all of that. So they, the supermarkets have lent into that and dealt with it. But it's not like whack-a-mole. It's like you focus on this and then you discover this and you discover this and discover this. So during the pandemic, there was a huge problem around the procurement of PPE. Right. And the government's now been taken to court because it knowingly purchased from factories in Malaysia that it had been warned are full of forced labour.
Even though they've been told.
They've been told.
And still...
to the tune of billions.
Yeah.
And so this is what I mean about it's how it's so prevalent across. And it's, back to your model factory. But part of the problem is, businesses in the West will go, so a factory can, say, produce 500,000 items a month. it will place an order for 1 million items a month from that factory, but it knows what its output is. It can't deliver 1 million, and therefore it has to subcontract out in that whole process. Yeah. And so it is just this endemic problem.
And I don't want to put you on the spot because I always want results now. I know we can't solve anything because that's the problem. It's ingrained. It's tied into all the systems of society. Yeah. But what small things can you do now when today, like in terms of clothing, like a person, is there any, you can't.
What can I do?
I didn't want to say, what do you do? Like, where do you shop sort of thing. I don't want to get that specific because I always look at the label. If it says Bangladesh, I go, oh, God,
But you know, actually, there are really good factories in Bangladesh as well. And this is the thing.
But then are there certain companies that use those good, or it's everything's a bit of...
But one factory in Bangladesh may be supplying everything from Chanel to fast fashion and all points in between. So it's really difficult. And I absolutely get your frustration in terms of the abhorrence of what modern slavery is. The abhorrence of Robert, 6'6", built like a brick house. I don't want to be contributing to that. So do I stop buying from British farms and everything else? The first thing you can do is be informed. So William Wilberforce, Transatlantic Slave Trade, he said, look, once you know about this, you can't claim anymore that you didn't know about it. It's kind of, you can't go, no, plausible deniability. No, that's gone now. So you're both snookered. But it's asking questions. So like when you're buying clothes, can you tell me where this has come from? Are you able to guarantee, whichever store you're in or label it is, that it's not tainted by forced labor or child labor? And you can ask that question. And I know as a former retailer, even if you ask it in the store, it gets fed up the chain. Yeah. And if enough questions are coming up to head office...
Just seeing numbers, just the numbers of people have to...
That is important, though, Complaints do get heard, and
just
they are
questions,
important.
Even, just questions.
Because that's how most sort of organisations are structured. Yeah. Actually, they go upwards management level. So even the lower managers will have to account for a complaint, and they will have to account for this letter or account for this type of information request, and it goes upwards, and then they get pressure. So management do get pressure.
That's something. I don't like the idea of a complaint, but I think just the question.
It's asking the question,
and it's like here's another one, another one.
Or you like your favourite brand is go to their website. Have they got a modern slavery statement and read it, and then ask questions of it, because some of them are just so vanilla that you say, well, tell me more. So that's a positive.
If enough people were asking questions, is enough. As
they'll go, oh, hang on, the shopper's moving on here. We're
and then some executive says to the boss, look, we might want to. Yeah. So it's a shift of mentality.
And if you can't find a statement,
why?
Where's your statement?
Where's your policy? Where's your
So ask questions, and if enough people ask questions, that's a movement. Okay.
The second thing you can do is. Is shop well, and it's to choose what to buy and not what to buy in terms of that, because if they go, well, we don't care, we just whatever, it's just, well, don't be part of the system, then go somewhere where it does care and consume less. Good for the planet, actually good for people as well. The other thing is report what you see. So people, back to being eyes and ears. So you're Romanian in a car wash. That if you're chatting with someone, they go, I get paid £5 a day. Well, that's not national minimum wage. And it may not be modern slavery. It may just be a national minimum wage violation. But we get loads of calls about that as well. And, we can activate those investigations going forward. Or if you see something, it's back to gut, a bit like sort of the people coming and going from a house at odd hours and everything else. Or you meet people and they're obviously under somebody else's control, or they're not dressed appropriately for the job that they're doing, or they're fearful, they won't interact with you. Nail bars, or car washes or construction where it's cash only, and the person you're talking with has got no English. And they're always looking off to the side, and they're looking at somebody. When you go to those cash-only car washes, it's only one person that ever collects the money. You notice that? And everybody looks to them.
I've stopped using them a couple of years ago after I heard of this.
I feel I'm feeling guilty now because there was
what, from the nail bars?
Yeah.
Well, I've got to have some treats.
Yeah.
Yeah, guy's got to look nice, doesn't he? But no, there was a sort of garden crew that came round to my next door neighbours a couple of months ago, and it was all Nepalese guys, and again, it didn't feel. It's one of those things that didn't feel right because these sort of, like a dozen guys just sort of fell out of a van and just sort of got on with it.
With one really friendly guy who speaks the English.
Yeah, none of them had proper tools, and one of them was wearing a suit.
Oh God!
There's an older gentleman, and he was wearing like a nice, it wasn't okay-ish suit, off the rack or whatever, but like. And he was wearing that doing the gardening, and it was really dirty and beaten up, and that was obviously, I don't know, that was kind of his clothes, I think.
Yeah.
And I tried to have a chat with him because he was sort of just around my garden or whatever, and I was like, "Oh, you're right, mate. Afternoon." And poor guy didn't speak a word of English, and again was looking off, and I got a weird kind of thing about that. But then I thought, well, I don't know, I suppose they're working or something, But that is that,
that's precisely it. We want people to call, and it's like even if you get it spectacularly wrong, it doesn't matter. Because what if you got it spectacularly right?
Yeah.
And those people were being exploited. Yeah. And, often from talking with police, it is about building an intelligence jigsaw. And it's, that call, that bit of information could be the last piece of a jigsaw that then enables them to execute a warrant and get the people out of that situation. And that's so important. And it's kind of like, as Brits, I don't want to make a mess or get it wrong. It's like, no, make a mess, get it wrong, call us.
There's no downside. Nobody's going to get in trouble.
Not at all.
With something like that, I mean, that is just sort of vague story. You know what I mean? I saw something and it was a bit odd, and
So really, it's report things because even if it doesn't solve something, that it adds to a bigger picture for you,
an intelligence picture.
You're part of the intelligence, right or wrong. In terms of clothing, you just be more mindful. Don't waste.
Same with
comments.
Food.
Yeah.
Same with food. Whichever in true BBC fashion, there are many supermarkets. Whichever supermarket you shop in, or food store that you shop in, ask politely. What are you doing to tackle modern slavery? What about the problem?
Make noise, just little ripples everywhere.
Yeah.
Karem and do you both know where your clothes and your mobile phones come from? Karem and Daniel. David? Okay. Well, that doesn't completely eradicate it.
Right.
David?
I know where the food comes from.
Well, from now on, you need to ask questions before you take it up to the manager. Wherever you go, speak. I want to speak to the manager. Okay.
Yeah. I do think, I do agree with that. I do think it's sort of education and being aware of things. So I think, unfortunately, most people would choose not to know how the sausage gets made. They do choose not to, to think about why their McDonald's double cheeseburger costs £1.50 or whatever it does for a burger, and you're like, how can that be?
I think
because someone's being exploited along the way.
We can't solve it now, but other generations will, and I think it's up to you to sort of lay the groundwork for a different generation that comes up.
Here's a little sort of psychological test we do with people, which is if I presented you cabbages. Okay. So here's 2 cabbages. This cabbage costs 75p. But I can't guarantee you the circumstances in which it was farmed, picked, and the whole journey to it now being on the shelf in the supermarket. 75p. This cabbage costs 85p. But I can guarantee everything about it. There was no exploitation in that cabbage.
Yeah.
Which one are you going to buy?
Yeah, I'd definitely go for the expensive one. I keep saying that, like with the t-shirts thing, I said, this shouldn't be this cheap. I don't want it to, it should be more expensive.
But when the cameras are off and in 3 weeks later, shall I tell you which cabbage you'll be buying?
No, I'd stick to the Polish one.
There are things.
The vast majority will buy that.
Yeah, no, of course it would. Yeah.
Here's the question behind it, though. Why are there 2 cabbages on the shelf in the first place? Why can't we have a cabbage on the shelf that we know the circumstances around it? And so, this is why it's a whole system change that needs to take place. So it isn't just about the consumer. It's also decisions that retailers make. So we need the retailers to go, I'm not going to put a cabbage on there or a T-shirt or whatever or a mobile phone. I'm not going to give the customer the option of buying something that means people and planet has been exploited.
Yeah, so the fixing doesn't come from one direction.
It's got to come. It's both ways.
Yeah.
It's top
and
down,
that's a
bottom
mentality
up.
change more than anything.
Well, just a silly example. I don't know why we still have battery eggs. Why aren't we should just make it free range? Why is there still the option? Again, the free range eggs are 10p, 15, 20p more expensive. But I always get free range. I never buy.
But it's as simple as there's no pressure on it enough to change. That's all it is. Enough pressure to change, it will change. So it's just that's all it is. Something has to come from somewhere to fix something. But there's no pressure at the moment.
Well, I think, and again, I think that possibly comes from education, from opening a dialogue about these things. Yeah.
Oh, right. So something cheery. I want positive. I want to end.
I was going to ask just as a side question. This is very tough work. This is, and I was going to ask: is this? Do you find this tough to deal with sometimes? Because I just it's very noble work, and thank goodness you're on the side of the angels. You're doing very positive, great stuff, but. Did you ever just find it sort of on yourself and your sort of mental mentality?
It's a great question. When you meet individuals, that's when it's hard, and you hear their stories, and we deliberately say, or I say to my colleagues, my frontline colleagues, teach us to care and not to care. And what I mean by that is we will care for people, but we can't overcare. You can't allow it to consume you. So my frontline colleagues, and in their contract, once a month, they have to have external supervision to process everything that they've heard.
As part of the job?
As part of the job.
Oh, really?
That's for preserving their mental health in that whole process. So I think when it's up close and personal, it's really hard. And I now lead an organization of in excess of 100 people, and there's loads of things that I have to do. So in some ways, I can stand back a little bit from it. But there are times when you feel yourself drawn in. And that story of Robert, it still haunts me, but it's 12, 13 years old.
I still think about it.
Yeah, but and that vision, of him standing in a doorway terrified, that I'll take that with me to my dying days. So I think it is about putting in place those things that keep your mental health well in that whole process. It's about celebrating wins. So I remember in 2011, I was in the Home Office and I said, we need a Modern Slavery Act. We need a national helpline. We need better care for victims. We need an independent anti-slavery commissioner. And we need better care for kids. We need to recognise that kids are part of this as well. And they said to me, you're not going to get any of those. 2015, in front of the minister in a big conference, I think I pissed them off. I said, Home Office, do you remember you told me we wouldn't get 5? We got 5. So don't ever say, no, you're not going to get these things. And I'm a bit of a stubborn mule as well, in terms of if I don't speak up for it, who else is going to do it instead of me? And actually, it is just so fundamentally wrong. It just absolutely... I don't, whether it's my upbringing, we used to talk around, I remember growing up, talking around the kitchen table about issues of justice.
Yeah.
So I think, it's some of it's nurture in all of that. So that's what keeps me going is moving it forward. Are there times when I just go, with this current government, it is more,
just pushing uphill constantly.
Or you see them deliberately, immigration smuggling, it's the same thing. No, it's not. Or the Nationality and Borders Act, which is just going to be catastrophic for victims of trafficking. You just have to go, okay, right.
Yeah, I can just imagine you when you saw that coming with everything you're trying to do, and then they introduce things like that, and you go, oh, for the... expletive. Yeah.
But you have to do it. But at the same time, you have to know when to step away. And you have to... So I deliberately build into my life those things that replenish me.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because if I didn't, this would it would overwhelm you.
So what does Andrew Wallis OBE do? What do you don't play rugby anymore?
No, knackered knees.
What do you do now?
I try to go to the gym frequently.
Okay.
I have a great set of friends. I cook.
Have you got any kids?
Music. Three adult kids.
What are they up to?
My son is DJing in Barcelona as we speak.
Oh,
I know he probably would have wrapped up by now. So yeah, he lives in Berlin. On the way to being a superstar DJ. My middle one is an artist based in Newcastle, and my youngest just graduated and joining the NHS.
Oh, to do what?
Data analysis.
Oh, okay. So. Why were you talking about the NHS before the podcast? What was you saying?
Lobbying. I think we were discussing lobbying.
Oh, yeah, we were discussing whether lobbying exists in the UK as much as it does in America.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
not financially driven, I don't think, but it's still.
So there you go, Andrew Wallis, OB. Thanks. So where have you come in from?
Bristol.
That your way?
No.
Why do I keep thinking you come from?
I live in Reading. I mean, it's not really.
Kind of
halfway.
Reading.
Yeah, it's halfway.
As I've said, once you go at the M25 to me,
it's all a mystery. It's just question marks, basically.
Whereas, I moved from London to Bristol. And I always, when I get on the train at Paddington, there's always a sort of sigh of, back to the west.
Right,
yeah, same. I mean, that's the thing. When I go, great, I'm back home.
So thank you very much for coming in. It's a
Sunday. Pleasure.
You've come the whole way down there on public transport, which is an endeavour on its own. So actually, me and Charles were trying to collect friends in high places. So can we sort of call you one of our mates?
You can.
So when we see you, go, oh yeah, it's one of my mates. Yeah. Andrew Wallis OBE. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's pleasure. Andrew Wallis OBE, just one of my mates we've had on the show. Thank you very much, and thank you, Andrew.
Have a good
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Here's your story, let's begin. The water's fine, come on, dive in. The future's here, it's right before your eyes. Step by step, you're on your way. You're welcome to a brighter day. Don't you know it feels good to be alive? You could be